Thank you for clicking on this video. Welcome, friends. My name is Marianne, and at 32, I've built a culinary empire that most people only dream about. But to my family, especially my younger sister, I'm still the disappointment who dropped out of college. At my dad's 65th birthday dinner last month, everything changed when my black card was declined for a $4,000 bill. What happened next left my entire family speechless. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family doubt your dreams. Trust me, the moment their restaurant manager rushed to our table is something you won't want to miss. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago. Our house wasn't anything special, just a modest 3-bedroom with faded blue siding on a street lined with similar homes. My father, Richard, taught high school mathematics for 30 years. He was strict but fair, the kind of teacher students remembered fondly years later. My mother, Diane, worked as a nurse at the local hospital, often taking night shifts so she could be home when we returned from school. Then there was my sister Sophia, 3 years younger than me. She was the golden child from the moment she was born. With her perfect grades, sweet disposition, and willingness to follow our parents' carefully laid plans, she could do no wrong. While I struggled with math despite my father's profession, Sophia seemed to absorb complex equations through osmosis. My mother would beam with pride as Sophia talked about following in her footsteps, becoming not just a nurse, but a doctor. I was different from the beginning. While Sophia sat at the kitchen table memorizing flashcards, I was experimenting with recipes. By age 10, I had taken over making dinner twice a week. I'd climb onto a step stool to reach the stove, transforming whatever modest ingredients we had into something special. Sometimes my father would nod appreciatively at a particularly good pasta sauce, but more often the conversation would turn to my declining math grades or college preparation. "Cooking is fine as a hobby, Marianne," my father would say, pushing aside a plate I'd spent hours preparing, "but it's not a career for someone with your potential." My mother was gentler but equally dismissive. "Sweetheart, you're so smart. You could be anything. A lawyer, an engineer, even a doctor like Sophia wants to be. Why waste time on cooking?" The comparisons were constant and crushing. At Sophia's middle school graduation, my aunt remarked how Sophia had given the valedictorian speech while I had barely made it to the ceremony on time, having been experimenting with a new chocolate soul recipe. No one mentioned that I'd won a citywide young chef competition that same week. By high school, that divide widened. Sophia joined every academic club, volunteered at the hospital with our mother, and was already receiving early college recruitment letters. I maintained decent grades but poured my passion into culinary arts, taking every food-related elective and working weekends at a local bakery. The breaking point came during my sophomore year of college. I'd reluctantly enrolled in pre-law to please my parents, but spent every free moment working in restaurant kitchens. When a renowned chef offered me an apprenticeship that conflicted with my classes, I made my choice. The night he told my parents I was dropping out was the worst of my life. We sat at the same dining table where I'd served countless meals. My father's face turned crimson as I explained my decision. "We did not sacrifice for 18 years to have you throw your life away on a pipe dream," he thundered. "Do you know how many people fail in the restaurant business? Do you understand how hard that life is?" My mother cried silently, looking at me as if I'd announced I was joining a cult. Sophia, home from her pre-med program for the weekend, shook her head in that condescending way that made me feel 2 feet tall. "You're just scared of real work, Marianne," she said. "Some of us are willing to push through challenges instead of taking the easy way out." The easy way out. That phrase burned into my mind as I packed my things that night. They truly believed cooking was my escape from real work, not understanding. It was the only work that had ever felt real to me. I left home at 19 with 2 suitcases, $300 saved from my bakery job, and a culinary fire that not even my family's freezing disapproval could extinguish. The last thing my father said as I walked out the door: "When this fails, don't expect us to pick up the pieces." I didn't know then that those words would echo in my mind through countless nights of exhaustion, self-doubt, and tears. I also didn't know that proving him wrong would become both my greatest motivation and my heaviest burden. My first apartment was a studio the size of a shoebox in a neighborhood where sirens served as nightly lullabies. The building smelled perpetually of cabbage and cigarettes, and the shower alternated between scalding and freezing without warning. But it was mine, and the rent was just within reach if I worked enough hours. I started at Bellini's, an Italian restaurant 12 blocks from my apartment. They needed a dishwasher, and I needed a job. My shift began at 4 in the afternoon and often didn't end until 2 in the morning. My hands cracked and bled from the industrial strength soap and hot water. The chef Marco was a tyrannical Italian immigrant who threw pans when orders came back wrong and cursed in a mixture of English and Italian that would make sailors blush. For 16 hours a day, I scrubbed pots crusted with burned marinara, sorted silverware, until my fingers cramped and cleared plates with half-eaten meals that reminded me how hungry I was. My dinner usually consisted of instant noodles or whatever mistakes the kitchen staff couldn't serve to customers. I lived this way for 8 months, sending out applications to every restaurant in the city. I took a notebook everywhere, writing down recipes and techniques I observed during my shifts. When the kitchen was slow, I'd ask questions about knife skills, sauce ratios, and cooking temperatures. Most of the staff ignored me, but occasionally the sous chef would demonstrate a technique when Marco wasn't looking. My break came when the salad station cook didn't show up for a Saturday night shift. Marco was rampaging through the kitchen, threatening to fire everyone when I stepped forward. "I can do it," I said, my voice steadier than my hands. He laughed in my face. "The dishwasher wants to cook." Fantastico. But desperation won out over doubt, and he pointed me to the station. That night, I prepared 87 salads without a single return. By the end of the evening, my feet were swollen inside my cheap sneakers, and my back felt permanently curved, but I'd never been happier. Marco said nothing. But the next day, I was assigned to the salad station permanently with a $2 per hour raise. For 3 years, I clawed my way up the kitchen hierarchy from salad station to appetizers, then to the pasta station, and finally to sous chef at a different restaurant, a more upscale place called Maison Bleue. My apartment upgraded from a shoebox to a slightly larger shoebox with fewer cockroaches. I was working 70 hours a week, minimum missing holidays, birthdays, any semblance of a social life. On my rare days off, I experimented with recipes in my tiny kitchen, filling notebooks with ideas. During this time, I tried calling home a few times. The conversations were strained brief. My mother would ask if I was eating enough. My father would inquire if I'd considered going back to school. Neither asked about my cooking. Sophia was too busy with medical school to come to the phone. After a while, the calls became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Then came the night that changed everything. Maison Bleue was catering a private event for a tech company. The executive chef called in sick with food poisoning, ironically enough, and I was thrust into leading the kitchen. The menu was ambitious. 5 courses for 60 guests, including the company's investors. The night was a blur of controlled chaos. I expedited orders, fixed mistakes, and somehow managed to plate 60 perfect desserts just as the servers arrived to collect them. As the event wound down, a man in an impeccably tailored suit entered the kitchen. "Who was in charge tonight?" he asked. I stepped forward, wiping my hands on my apron, expecting a complaint. "William Shaw," he said, extending his hand. "That was the best meal I've had in Chicago this year." William turned out to be both a major investor in the tech company and a restaurant industry veteran. We talked until 3 in the morning, long after the kitchen was cleaned and the staff gone. He asked about my background, my ambitions, my recipes. He listened in a way no one had before, not just politely, but with genuine interest and respect. 2 weeks later, he called with a proposition he wanted to back me in starting a high-end catering company. His connections, my food, a partnership. People with money want exceptional food experiences, he explained. Not just restaurants, but private events, corporate functions, celebrations. They'll pay premium for something unique. Sapphire Culinary was born with a business loan guaranteed by William, a converted warehouse space as our kitchen, and my collection of recipes. The first year was brutal. We were understaffed, overextended, and barely breaking even. Twice I nearly called it quits. I was sleeping on a cot in my office, showering at a gym 3 blocks away, and living on coffee and adrenaline. But slowly, word spread. A celebrity chose us for their intimate wedding and posted about the experience. A tech CEO hired us for a product launch and referred us to others. William's connections opened doors, but it was the food, my food, that made people come back. During all this, my family remained distant shadows. I sent Christmas cards with my business card enclosed. They went unacknowledged. I read about Sophia's medical school graduation in the alumni newsletter my father still received. I sent a congratulatory bouquet. No response. Their silence hurt, but I channeled that pain into my work. Every rejected phone call became fuel for longer hours, more innovative dishes, bigger ambitions. I wasn't just building a business. I was building proof that I hadn't made a mistake. The watershed moment for Sapphire Culinary came when a Hollywood director's assistant called about catering and awards after-party. The event would host 200 A-list celebrities, and the director had tasted our food at a Chicago fundraiser. I nearly rejected it. We'd never handled an event of that scale or prominence. But William pushed me. "This is what we've been building toward," he insisted. "One perfect night can change everything." We hired temporary staff, flew in specialty ingredients, and I personally worked on the menu for 3 weeks straight. The night of the event, I was so nervous I could barely breathe. But when the first plates came back, empty, and word spread through the venue about the food, I knew we'd succeeded. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Celebrities wanted us for private dinners. Production companies inquired about movie set catering. A hotel chain expressed interest in a partnership. Within 18 months, Sapphire Culinary expanded to New York and Los Angeles. We hired executive chefs trained in my recipes and techniques. I was traveling constantly, overseeing operations, training staff, and developing new menus. At 28, I bought my first property, a penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan with a kitchen larger than my first 3 apartments combined. My wardrobe evolved from food-stained t-shirts to designer clothes cozened by a personal shopper. I traded my used Honda for a Tesla. I flew business class and stayed in 5-star hotels. Money, which had been a constant worry for so long, became an abstract concept. Numbers in accounts that grew faster than I could spend them. At 30, I launched Elite Taste, a ultra-premium division catering exclusively to billionaires, political figures, and royalty. We flew private chefs to yachts in the Mediterranean, prepared intimate dinners in Aspen chalets, and designed 12-course tasting menus for diplomatic functions. Our minimum booking was $50,000, and we were booked months in advance. Magazine profiles called me a culinary prodigy and the chef who feeds the powerful. I appeared on cooking shows, gave keynote speeches at food industry conferences, and declined 3 offers to write cookbooks. William stepped back to an advisory role, and I became the sole CEO of a company valued at over $60 million. I should have been fulfilled. I had achieved more than I'd ever dreamed possible when I left home with 2 suitcases and wounded pride. Yet something fundamental was missing. Success is hollow when you have no one to share it with. I dated occasionally, but relationships always took a backseat to the business. Friends were mostly industry connections, people who wanted something from me, or admired what I represented rather than who I was. And always there was the absence of my family. I sent gifts, expensive, thoughtful items that showcased my success without being overly showy. A retirement watch for my father when he left teaching, a spa weekend for my mother's 60th birthday, a set of professional-grade medical reference books when Sophia completed her residency. The gifts were accepted according to the delivery confirmations, but acknowledgments were rare and perfunctory. Once my mother called to thank me for her birthday present. The conversation lasted 4 minutes and 23 seconds. She didn't ask about my business or life. I knew about their lives through careful research. My father had retired from teaching but took a part-time position coaching the math team. My mother volunteered at the hospital auxiliary. Sophia had joined a prestigious medical practice specializing in cardiology and married another doctor. They purchased a house in the suburbs not far from our parents. I tried convincing myself that their absence was a necessary sacrifice for my success, that I had chosen this path, knowing it would separate me from them. But in quiet moments between flights or in the early morning hours when sleep eluded me, I wondered if any amount of success could fill the family-shaped hole in my life. Then on a Tuesday afternoon in April, my phone rang with my mother's number. I nearly dropped it in surprise. "Marianne." My mother's voice sounded older than I remembered, more hesitant. "Do you have a moment to talk?" I was in the middle of a menu tasting for a diplomatic function, surrounded by staff, waiting for my feedback on a delicate seafood dish. I immediately excused myself and stepped into my office. "Of course, Mom, is everything okay?" My mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Someone was ill. The house needed repairs they couldn't afford. Sophia had experienced some setback. "Everything's fine," she assured me, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Your father is turning 65 next month." "We're having a small dinner celebration," I thought. "Well, we thought you might want to join us." The invitation caught me completely off guard. I couldn't remember the last time they had explicitly invited me to a family gathering. Usually, I received a cursory, "You're welcome to come" message for major holidays, which we all understood as a formality rather than a genuine desire for my presence. "Dad wants me there." I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. A pause. "He mentioned it would be nice to have both his daughters present." Not exactly a heartfelt plea, but more than I'd gotten in years. I checked my calendar while we spoke. I was scheduled to be in New York that week for the opening of our newest location. I'll be there, I said before I could talk myself out of it. Just tell me when and where. After hanging up, I sat in my office staring at the skyline. Part of me was already regretting the commitment. Family gatherings inevitably devolved into subtle digs about my career choice, uncomfortable silences, and Sophia dominating the conversation with her medical accomplishments. But another part, the part that still craved my parents' approval despite everything, was already planning what to wear, what to say, how to present myself. In the weeks leading up to the dinner, I found myself increasingly anxious. I reorganized my schedule, postponing the New York trip and clearing 3 days around the event. I wanted buffer time in case things went well, unlikely, or recovery time if they went poorly, probable. The question of a gift consumed me. What do you get for the father who has dismissed your life's work? I considered and rejected dozens of options. Anything too expensive would seem showy. Anything too modest would seem thoughtless. Finally, I found a vintage Omega Seamaster from the year of his birth. He had always admired the brand, but considered it an unnecessary luxury on a teacher's salary. The watch was elegant without being flashy, expensive, without being ostentatious, perfect. The day before the dinner, I flew to Chicago on my company's private jet. I could have stayed in my penthouse, but it felt too grand, too removed from the world of my family. Instead, I booked a suite at a boutique hotel downtown. I spent the evening reviewing the restaurant where we'd be dining, a steakhouse my father had mentioned wanting to try for years, according to my mother. I made a large anonymous donation to the establishment to ensure exceptional service for his table without revealing my connection. As for my appearance, I deliberated endlessly. My closet now contained clothing from designers. My family wouldn't recognize accessories worth more than my father's yearly teaching salary. In the end, I opted for understatement dark jeans, a simple cashmere sweater, minimal jewelry. My usual driver offered to take me, but I called a rideshare instead. No need to arrive in a chauffeur Bentley. The ride to my parents' house, the same house I'd grown up in, was surreal. The neighborhood hadn't changed much, though it seemed smaller somehow. Children's bikes lay on lawns. Porch lights glowed against the early evening darkness. I hadn't been back in almost 7 years. My mother answered the door. She had aged gray now, dominating her once brown hair, new lines around her eyes. For a moment, we both just stared at each other. Then she stepped forward and gave me a brief, awkward hug. "You look well," she said, stepping back to examine me. "So do you, Mom." The living room was, as I remembered, the same furniture, perhaps a bit more worn. The same family photos on the wall. I noticed my college graduation photo was displayed, but nothing more recent. It was as if my life had stopped the moment I left school. My father entered from the kitchen. He moved more slowly than I remembered his shoulders. Slightly stooped, but his eyes were the same sharp assessing. "Marianne," he said with a nod. Not quite a greeting, not quite an acknowledgement. "Happy birthday, Dad." I handed him the carefully wrapped watch box. "I thought you might like this." He set it aside without opening it. "We'll do gifts after dinner. Sophia should be here soon." As if summoned by her name, the front door opened and my sister swept in. Sophia had always been pretty in a conventional way, but now she radiated a polished confidence. Designer clothes, perfect makeup hair, styled in an expensive cut. Behind her came a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a practiced smile. Her husband, Dr. Andrew Parker, according to my research. "Sorry we're late," Sophia announced, kissing our mother's cheek. The sitter was delayed, and then traffic was terrible. She spotted me and paused. "Marianne, you made it." "Wouldn't miss Dad's birthday," I replied with a smile that felt stretched across my face. Sophia gave me a quick perfunctor hug. "You look different," she said, stepping back to examine me critically. "Have you lost weight?" Before I could respond, she launched into introductions. "Andrew, this is my sister, Marianne. She works in food service." The way she said it made food service sound like I was flipping burgers at a fast food joint. Andrew shook my hand with the condescending smile. Doctors often reserve for people they consider less educated. "Sophia mentioned you're a chef." "Which restaurant?" "I own a catering company, actually," I said. "Several of them." Sophia laughed lightly. "Marianne has always had big ambitions. Remember when she wanted to open a 5-star restaurant right out of culinary school?" I remember my father said, checking his watch. "We should head to the restaurant. Our reservation is at 7. As we gathered our coats, Sophia ran a critical eye over my understated outfit. You could have dressed up a bit for Dad's birthday, she said quietly. This is a nice restaurant. I bit back a retort about having dined at Michelin-starred restaurants around the world. This evening wasn't about one-upping my sister, but as we walked to our respective cars, I couldn't help noticing Sophia pointing out her new Mercedes SUV to our parents while casting glances my way, making sure I noticed. Some things never change, I thought, climbing into my rideshare. But other things do, and my family was about to discover just how much. The restaurant Gibson's Prime was housed in a restored historic building in downtown Chicago. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings and leather booths lined the perimeter of the dining room. The matra greeted us with practiced charm, consulting his reservation book. Party of 5 for Richard Thompson. At 7:00, he led us to a prime table near the center of the room. I noticed several staff members glancing my way, their eyes widening slightly in recognition. I gave a subtle headshake. Not tonight. What my family didn't know was that Gibson's Prime was one of my investment properties. After the success of Elite Taste, I diversified into restaurant ownership, holding significant stakes in upscale establishments across the country. I wasn't just a customer here. I was essentially one of the bosses. As we were seated, a waiter appeared instantly with water and menus. Good evening. My name is Michael, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something from the bar? My father ordered a premium scotch, uncharacteristically indulgent for him. My mother chose white wine. Sophia and Andrew both ordered cocktails. I requested sparkling water with lime. Just water. Sophia raised an eyebrow. It's Dad's birthday. Live a little. I have an early meeting tomorrow. I lied. In truth, I wanted to keep my head completely clear for whatever this evening might bring. The menus arrived, and my father's eyes widened at the prices. Gibson's was known for its dry-aged steaks and exceptional seafood, and the cost reflected that quality. Order whatever you'd like, I said. It's a special occasion. My father frowned slightly. We can manage our own bill, Marianne. Sophia jumped in. Andrew and I insist on paying anyway. It's your birthday, Dad. She flashed her diamond wedding ring as she reached for her water glass, making sure it caught the light. That's very generous, our mother said, patting Sophia's hand. You two work so hard. Conversation turned to Sophia and Andrew's lives. Their new house in the suburbs, the private preschool, where they'd secured a spot for their 3-year-old son, the hospital committee. Andrew had recently been appointed. 2. Our parents listened with rapt attention, asking questions and nodding appreciatively. When Michael returned for our orders, my father selected the most expensive steak on the menu, along with lobster mac and cheese and truffle potatoes. My mother looked concerned at his choices, but said nothing. Sophia and Andrew both ordered premium cuts with all the fixings. I chose a simple fillet with seasonal vegetables. How's the hospital, Mom? I asked during a lull in Sophia's monologue about their recent vacation to Bora Bora. I'm fully retired now, she replied. But I volunteer twice a week. Nothing exciting? She's being modest, Sophie interjected. She runs the entire volunteer program. The hospital administrator says the place would fall apart without her. Our mother beamed at Sophia's praise. I wondered when I had last made her smile that way. And how about you, Marianne? My father finally asked, setting down his second scotch, still with that catering business. Before I could answer, Sophia laughed. Remember when you dropped out of pre-law for that? Mom and Dad were convinced you'd be back in school within 6 months. I remember, I said evenly. But yes, I'm still in catering and food service. Business is good. What exactly does that mean? Good, Sophia pressed. Like you're making ends meet, breaking even? I took a sip of water. We're profitable. I've expanded to several cities. Andrew looked mildly interested for the first time. How many employees do you have? About 400 full-time across all divisions. Another 600 part-time or contract workers, depending on the season. My father's fork paused halfway to his mouth. That many? I nodded. We handle everything from private dinners to large corporate events. We recently catered the governor's ball after the Academy Awards. The what now? Sophia laughed incredulously. You expect us to believe your little catering company served Hollywood celebrities? I don't expect you to believe anything, Sophia, I replied calmly. I'm just answering Dad's question. The steaks arrived momentarily, distracting everyone. Michael brought a fresh bottle of wine for the table, a vintage Cabernet that wasn't on the menu. Compliments of the house for the birthday celebration, he said, though his eyes flickered to me. As we ate, Sophia continued dominating the conversation, describing their plans for a summer home in Michigan. Andrew's practice is doing phenomenally well. We're thinking of buying a boat, too. When she finally paused for breath, my mother turned to me. Do you still live in that apartment downtown? I moved a few years ago, I said. Still downtown, but a different building. Probably for the best, Sophia said. That old neighborhood was getting sketchy. I worry about you living alone in Thessaly, though. I have good security, I assured her, thinking of the doorman, the private elevator, and the state-of-the-art system in my penthouse. Well, when you're ready to settle down properly, let us know, Sophia said. Andrew has a colleague, divorced but airily nice guy, a radiologist. My father chuckled. Might be good for you to meet someone stable, Marianne. The implication that I needed financial rescue stung. I'd been independent since 19, had built multiple successful businesses, and employed hundreds of people. Yet they still saw me as the family charity case. As dessert menus were presented, Sophia's interrogation continued. So what do you drive these days? Still that old Honda? Upgraded, I said simply. To what? Please tell me not another used car, she laughed. You know, with Andrew's hospital discount, we could probably help you get something reliable. I smiled tightly. That's thoughtful, but I'm fine. At least tell me you have health insurance now, my mother interjected. Freelance work is so unpredictable. Before I could respond, Sophia's voice took on a theatrical whisper. Mom, stop. If Marianne wants to live like a college student forever, that's her choice. We can't all be ambitious, Andrew chuckled. Not everyone is cut out for the professional world. The food industry suits some people. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. The same feeling I'd had at 19 when they dismissed my dreams. But I wasn't that insecure girl anymore. Actually, I recently acquired a minority stake in a restaurant group. We're opening locations in London and Tokyo next year. Sophia rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, please, Marianne, stop pretending you have money. It's Dad's birthday. Can we just enjoy dinner without your fantasies? The table fell silent. Even Andrew looked uncomfortable with Sophia's bluntness. Sophia, my mother murmured. What we all know, the restaurant business is struggling. There's no way she's doing as well as she claims. Sophia turned home. It's fine if you're not successful, but don't make up stories to impress us. I took a deep breath considering my options. I could defend myself, list my accomplishments, pull out financial statements, or I could let it go as I had for years. But something had shifted. Perhaps it was seeing my father older, more vulnerable than I remembered. Perhaps it was realizing that despite everything I'd achieved, part of me still craved their validation. Or perhaps I was simply tired of being the family failure when I was anything but. I'll tell you what I said as Michael cleared our dessert plates. Let me take care of the check tonight for Dad's birthday. Sophia lawed out loud. Right. And how exactly will you pay for a $500 dinner? Ismailed, I think I can manage. Michael returned with the leather-bound check presenter, placing it discreetly beside me. Whenever you're ready, ma'am. I opened it and glanced at the total $4,527.38. My father had ordered multiple rounds of premium scotch. Sophia and Andrew had selected 3 bottles of wine costing over $300 each. The steaks, appetizers, sides, and desserts had added up quickly. Sophia craned her neck trying to see the total. When she caught a glimpse, her eyes widened. $4,000. Dad, I'm so sorry. We didn't mean to order so much. Andrew looked genuinely concerned. We can split it 3 ways. Marianne shouldn't have to contribute if she can't afford it. I removed my black card from my wallet, a limited edition titanium American Express card, available only by invitation to high net worth clients. I slid it into the check presenter and handed it back to Michael without comment. My father looked at the card with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. What's that? It's called a Centurion card. Andrew answered before I could, his tone incredulous. They're invitation only. You need to spend hundreds of thousands annually just to qualify. Sophia snorted. It's probably fake. You can buy replicas online. Michael returned moments later, his expression uncomfortable. He leaned down and whispered, I'm sorry, Miss Thompson, but the card was declined. A beat of silence. Then Sophia burst into laughter. Oh my God, I knew it. She looked around the table triumphantly. She's been bluffing all night. My father looked embarrassed, staring down at his hands. My mother reached out, patting my arm sympathetically. It's all right, dear. Andrew already said he would cover it. This is why you shouldn't pretend to be something you're not. Sophia continued, enjoying my humiliation. It always catches up with you eventually. I felt my cheeks burning but maintained my composure. There must be some mistake. Could you please run it again? Michael nodded and left with the card. Sophia was practically gloating now. Some big shot business owner? Can't even pay for dinner. This is priceless. Sophia, that's enough, my father said quietly. But the damage was done. Before I could respond, the restaurant manager, Jordan, rushed to our table. He was pale and clearly agitated. Miss Thompson, I sincerely apologize for the confusion. He spoke in a hushed, urgent tone, but not quite enough to prevent my family from hearing. There appears to be an issue with our payment system. But more importantly, I just realized who you are. He swallowed hard. We still owe you $250,000 from last month's catering contract for the International Business Summit. Our accounting department has been trying to contact your CFO all week. The table fell silent. Jordan continued, seemingly unaware of the bomb he'd just dropped. As the owner of both Elite Taste and a 30% stakeholder in our restaurant group, your meals are, of course, complimentary. I cannot apologize enough for the embarrassment. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me in various states of shock. My father's mouth hung slightly open. My mother clutched her napkin. Andrew looked like someone had struck him. And Sophia. Sophia's face had drained of all color. It's fine, Jordan, I said calmly. A simple misunderstanding. Please charge my card for tonight's dinner as normal. Absolutely not, Jordan insisted. In fact, I've taken the liberty of arranging a bottle of Dom Perignon Rosé Gold for the table. It's your father's birthday after all. He turned to my stunned family. Miss Thompson is one of the most successful restaurateurs and caterers in the country. Her company, Elite Taste, just signed a multi-million-dollar exclusive contract with the Western States Diplomatic Corps. We're honored to have her in our establishment. With that, he signaled, and a waiter appeared with an ornate ice bucket containing a gold-plated champagne bottle. Another server followed with 5 crystal flutes. Owner, my father finally managed 30% stakeholder, I corrected gently. I don't manage day-to-day operations here. I just provided some of the capital for the renovation last year. But you said you were in catering. My mother stammered. I am. That's how it started. Elite Taste is the premium division of Sapphire Culinary Group. We now have operations in 12 cities and 3 countries. Andrew found his voice next and the $250,000 they owe you. A contract for a business summit last month. We provided food and service for 2,000 attendees over 3 days. I shrugged as if discussing pocket change. Jordan had begun pouring the champagne. Miss Thompson's company has catered events for presidents, royalty, and tech billionaires. The waiting list for her personal chef services is over 2 years long. Jordan, please, I said, embarrassed by his effusiveness. It's my father's birthday. We're just having a family dinner. He nodded, finishing with the champagne. Of course, enjoy your evening. And again, our deepest apologies for the confusion. Ash departed, and uncomfortable silence descended on the table. The champagne sparkled in the crystal flutes untouched. My father stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. My mother's eyes had filled with tears, though I couldn't tell if they were from pride, shame, or some mixture of both. Sophia was the first to speak. Why didn't you tell us? Her voice had lost its earlier condescension, replaced by genuine confusion. I considered the question carefully. Why hadn't I told them pride hurt the desire to be valued for who I was rather than what I had achieved? I tried, I said finally. I sent business cards with holiday greetings. I mentioned expansions when we spoke. I invited you all to the opening of our Chicago headquarters 3 years ago. We thought my father began, then stopped. I assumed it was just a small operation, something you were making work, but not this. When you left college, my mother said quietly, we were so worried you were throwing your life away. Every time you mentioned the business, we thought you were just putting on a brave face. I nodded, understanding, washing over me. They hadn't been ignoring my success. They simply hadn't believed it was real. In their minds, I was still the rebellious daughter who had chosen a risky path. They had been waiting all these years for me to fail or come to my senses. Sophia stared into her untouched champagne. The Academy Awards really 4 years running, I confirmed. We also do the Met Gala, several presidential functions and private events for clients I can't name without violating NDAs. Andrew whistled softly. And the black card, that's really yours. Since I was 29, I said it has never been declined before. I suspect there was actually an issue with the payment system. My father reached for his champagne with a slightly trembling hand. I think we have some catching up to do. For the first time that evening, I felt a weight lifting. Not because they were impressed by my wealth or success, but because maybe, just maybe, they were finally ready to see me, the real me. I raised my glass to new beginnings. And happy birthday, Dad. The drive back to my parents' house was quiet. We had decided to continue our conversation there rather than in the public setting of the restaurant. I rode with my parents while Sophia and Andrew followed in their car. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, more contemplative, as if everyone needed time to readjust their perceptions. In the living room, my father finally opened his birthday gift. His hands trembled slightly as he removed the vintage Omega Seamaster from its box. This island he trailed off, turning the watch over in his hands. I mentioned this model once, maybe 30 years ago. How did you remember? I remember everything you taught me, Dad, I said softly, including your passion for classic timepieces. He looked up, his eyes moist. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I sat beside him on the couch, but I would like to explain some things if you're willing to listen. My mother settled on his other side while Sophia and Andrew took the chairs across from us. For the first time in years, I had my family's complete attention. I told them everything. The early years of washing dishes and sleeping on a cot in my office, the lucky break with William, the gradual expansion of the business. I described the 18-hour workdays, the failed recipes, the events that went wrong before we learned to get them right. I shared the loneliness of success without family to share it with, and how every achievement felt incomplete because the people who mattered most weren't there to witness it. I wanted to make you proud, I admitted. But more than that, I needed to prove to myself that I had made the right choice, that following my passion wasn't a mistake. My father rubbed his thumb across the face of his new watch. I was wrong, Marianne. Not about being concerned, that's a parent's job, but about doubting your ability to succeed on your own terms. He looked up. I'm sorry I didn't support your dreams. We were scared for you, my mother added. The restaurant industry is so volatile. We'd heard so many stories of talented people who never made it, and I was jealous, Sophia said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. You had the courage to chase what you wanted. I followed the path laid out for me. Shet twisted her wedding ring. Don't get me wrong, I love medicine. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd fought harder for what I wanted like you did. What did you want? I asked, realizing I'd never actually heard Sophia express a personal dream. She laughed softly. Architecture. I used to sketch building designs instead of taking notes in high school, but it wasn't practical, wasn't secure. Andrew looked at his wife in surprise. You never told me that. It never seemed important, she shrugged. We can't all run off and follow our bliss. Maybe not run off, I acknowledged, but it's never too late to incorporate your passions into your life. We talked late into the night. Really talked, perhaps for the first time ever, about dreams and disappointments, about the weight of expectations and the fear of failure. My father admitted that his insistence on a sensible career had come from his own unfulfilled ambitions to be a mathematician rather than a teacher. My mother confessed she had collected newspaper clippings whenever my name appeared in business publications, too proud to tell me but unable to ignore my achievements. Around 2 a.m, as the conversation finally wound down, I shared my latest project. I'm opening a new concept restaurant here in Chicago next month. Farm-toteable fine dining, beauty-accessible pricing. I'd like you all to be my guests for the friends and family night before the public opening. We wouldn't miss it, my father said firmly. Actually, I continued, I was thinking of something more. Dad, you always talked about the restaurant you would open if you hadn't become a teacher. The one with your grandmother's recipes and your own mathematical approach to flavor combinations. He nodded, surprised. You remember that? I remember everything about food. I smiled. What would you think about consulting on the menu? Bringing some of those family recipes to life? The look on his face, shock transitioning to tentative joy, was worth every difficult moment of the evening. And Mom, I turned to her, your organizational skills made you legendary at the hospital. The restaurant could use someone with your talents for the charitable foundation we're establishing alongside it, providing culinary training for disadvantaged youth. You'd trust me with that? She asked. I can't think of anyone better. Sophia and Andrew exchanged glances. What about us? Sophia asked, her tone lacking its earlier edge. Well, Dr. Parker, I grinned at my brother-in-law. We need a medical consultant for our staff wellness program. And as for you, sis, I paused. How would you feel about designing our private dining spaces? A chance to flex those architectural muscles in a low-pressure environment. The smile that spread across Sophia's face was genuine without a trace of competition or condescension. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. As dawn approached, we made plans for weekly family dinners, a summer vacation together, and regular updates about our respective lives. The barriers that had stood between us for over a decade hadn't completely fallen, but they had cracked enough to let light through. In the months that followed, our relationships transformed. My father and I spent hours developing recipes, his mathematical precision complementing my creative intuition. My mother reorganized our charitable foundation with such efficiency that we doubled our impact within 6 months. Sophia discovered a genuine talent for interior design, and her medical practice husband found unexpected fulfillment in helping establish health programs for restaurant workers. The new restaurant, which we named Thompson's, opened Torreview reviews and packed reservations. At the friends and family night, my father stood beside me as we welcomed guests, his Omega Seamaster gleaming on his wrist, his chest puffed with pride. Success is meaningless if you have no one to share it with. This was the lesson I had to learn the hard way. All those years striving to prove my worth, I had missed what truly mattered. Not validation from others, but connection with those we love. I had built an empire out of determination and talent, but I discovered that the real wealth was not in my bank accounts or prestigious client list. It was in the renewed relationships with my family, the bridge we had built over years of misunderstanding and hurt. My black card being declined that night was the best thing that could have happened. It forced the truth into the open and gave us all a chance to see each other clearly, perhaps for the first time. So what about you? Have you ever had a moment when misunderstanding or assumptions created a wall between you and someone you love? How did you break through it? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that success comes in many forms, and that it's never too late to rebuild what's broken. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, true wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by who walks beside you when both success and failure come knocking.